Hi there everybody, so today we have a patron suggestion and the video is called What If Operation Unthinkable Happened? From AlternateHistoryHub. The link to the original video is going to be in the description below. If you want to be part of our patron community, the link is also in the description below. A big shout out to our new patron member who's called Faris. Thank you for subscribing. And without further ado, let's jump into the video. If you have any thoughts, comments, whatever, let me know in the comment section below. Okay, let's see what they got for us.
It's no surprise that the West and the USSR hated each other. It's no surprise that immediately after Berlin fell, the Iron Curtain rose. Yet it is a surprise that there was a plan so ludicrous and dangerous, it not only would have caused World War III, but nuclear war. It came from none other than Winston Churchill.
I'm not surprised.
Was called Operation Unthinkable.
I'm really not surprised.
Churchill was angry at the amount of countries the Soviets claimed influence over after Nazi Germany fell. He believed that when World War II was finished, that the USSR would have been on the brink of collapse. However, this was not the case, and Churchill did not like this new world. The USSR had begun installing new communist governments in Eastern Europe, and their armies were too far west in Churchill's eyes.
One thing about Churchill is that he was actually a firm anti-communist, and the British public and the government was also firmly anti-communist, I mean the majority. And during this, or before the outbreak of the Second World War, the Western powers, meaning the Western European powers like France and Great Britain, they actually wanted to push Germany and the Soviet Union to go to war with each other. And their thoughts or plans were, when those two superpowers, like economically collapse because of the war and so on, that they could then swoop in and just install democratic governments. But yeah, the British, Chamberlain and later on Churchill, they were firm anti-communists. So as I said, I'm not surprised that the idea came from Churchill, but okay.
Eastern Europe, and their armies were too far west in Churchill's eyes. Thus, he proposed a solution called Operation Unthinkable, and it was truly unthinkable. The plan was a full-scale Anglo-American conflict against the Russians. It was meant to drive out the Soviet forces from Germany, Poland, and Eastern Europe to counter Russia's ever-growing power. Since it was so over the top, many thought Operation Unthinkable was suicidal. Thus, the plan of total war was quickly ignored by reasonable leaders. Soon after, Churchill was voted out of office for unrelated reasons. Yet what if
And somebody should have taught Churchill about PR. You should never, develop a plan and name it Unthinkable. I mean, who's gonna support it? He should have named, I don't know, the Operation, we're gonna definitely win this one, or something like that. But okay.
After Churchill was voted out of office for unrelated reasons. Yet what if Operation Unthinkable was put into effect? What if it actually happened? What would be the outcome if such a strange plan was carried out? Well, here is one scenario. The first
Okay, before he begins, I want to hear your comments in the comment section below. Who would have won? We're talking about the year 1945. So, the end of the Second World War. Who would have won? The Soviets or Western powers, meaning, like Americans and British, and eventually, like French units, and so on. Let me know.
Obstacle the Allied powers, allied as in British and Americans, would have had to overcome is the vast numbers difference between them and the Russians. The Russian force numbered in total of 11 million. 6.5 of which were on the German front. The Soviet army simply outnumbered the Anglo-American force 2-1. So how would the Allies counter this? Well, the plan was to rearm 100,000 captured German soldiers and revive the destroyed German war machine. This time, however, under Allied control against the Russians. Yet even bringing back the Germans would not be enough to equal the Soviets. So there was another option. Nuclear war.
And with that, if I was a, like Churchill or whatever, you cannot, the anti-Soviet sentiment in Germany back then, like after the Second World War and before the Second World War, was also firmly anti-communist. But I wouldn't suggest to them to rearm the German army and to move them further to the east. I would use that remilitarized German army to eventually liberate, like Eastern German parts, and then keep those troops there, but moving with German troops back into Poland and, I don't know, Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, and so on. It wouldn't be great. So using the German military would only be, a positive thing, let's call it that way, inside of the German territory. But from there, they would need to advance on their own, so with American and British troops. And yeah, the Soviet army in manpower was greater than the Allied ones, British and American ones. Also regarding the tank number, as far as I know, but with but the Allies had, I think, more aircraft at their disposal. But okay, yeah, nuclear bomb, that's a big thing.
Not be enough to equal the Soviets, so there was another option: nuclear war. Churchill knew about Project Manhattan and how the Americans had the potential to create a nuclear bomb. Keep in mind, this was before the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the plan was to harness American nukes to bomb USSR cities, most importantly Moscow, Kiev, and such. In his mind, this would be enough to crush the Soviets into submission and force their retreat, or at least disorient them while the Allied forces swept over Europe. Operation Unthinkable goes into effect. On July 1st, 1945, the Allied powers launch a full-scale military assault against Russian positions. This coalition of British, American, and German forces, 47 divisions in total, cross into communist territory. The fighting is brutal, drawn out, and an upward fight for the Allies. Not only would they need to push past Germany, but into Poland, East Russia, Moscow, or even farther to stop any USSR resistance.
Okay, let's talk about those countries. I think that Polish civilians and so on, that they would firmly be on the side of the Allied forces, and that they would rise up against, like the Soviet state. So the Allies would have a plus on the Polish frontier, let's call it that way. In Czechoslovakia, I think also in Hungary, also in Romania, I'm not sure. In Yugoslavia, I don't think that they would receive a warm welcome, because at that time, we're talking still about 1945, before Yugoslavia broke up with the Soviet Union. So in Yugoslavia, Tito was called the Stalin of the Balkans. So, like the best student of Stalin and so on. So I think Yugoslavia would have been on the side of the Soviet Union. But, I don't know. I think that Poland and Czechoslovakia would start either a guerrilla warfare to cut off the supply lines of the Soviets, or rearm themselves and, join the Western powers to push into the Soviet Union. That's my opinion. If you disagree, let me know.
East Russia, Moscow, or even farther to stop any USSR resistance. The Soviets begin to overtake the Allies, and the Americans decide to bring in the big guns. Diverting nukes that were meant for Japan, the US drops Little Boy on Moscow. The Kremlin and a large portion of the city is destroyed. This catches the Russian forces off guard, and the Allies are able to push closer to Berlin. However, after the shock goes away, the Russians slowly fight back the Americans and British. This goes in part with the fact that the Russians simply outnumbered the Allies and eventually would be able to beat them back. Perhaps a few more nuclear bombs would be dropped on Russia over the next few months, but this would not deter the Soviets. Soon the Russians would invade France and the Allies would retreat to Britain. Soviet V-2 rockets could then strike London.
You think?
This scenario isn't an...
Really? So, okay, the thing with Stalin, as we know from the Second World War, is he's gonna put every man, woman, and child in front of the enemy. So bombing Soviet cities Yeah, I think that that Stalin, because Stalin died in 53, so, you know, like you have some years between 45 and 53. But I think that Stalin, yeah, he wouldn't capitulate. The Soviets would, I think, eventually defend larger parts of the Soviet Union. I mean, the European part of the Soviet Union. But I don't think that they would be able to push until France and then bomb, you know, like Great Britain. I really disagree kind of with that. I don't think that the Soviets would be able to push, because you need always to take into account that the Americans have nuclear bombs. So they could use those nuclear bombs as, you know, like defensive tactical bombs or offensive bombs. They could just drop it on a big, you know, like airport where Russian or Soviet aircrafts are and so on. So I don't think that they would push to France. But again, that's my opinion.
An 100% prediction, but just judging by the balance of power, armies, and conditions of the time, it's a fair representation of what probably would have occurred. The British and Americans simply weren't in the position to battle the Soviets right after a world war. The Russians had taken half of Europe and installed their own allied governments. That's the reason why Operation Unthinkable was never put into effect, or even considered as an immediate offensive measure. How do you think the world would be if Operation Unthinkable happened? Tell us in the comments. Like us on Facebook, subscribe if you have not done so. This is Cody
Definitely.
from the Alternate History Hub.
Subscribe to them. Okay, great video, but I disagree with the notion that the Soviet Union would push until France. And he's still only counting, you know, like British and American troops. But what's with France? Would France join the fight? Would the Allies be able to militarize the Germans again? How would the militarization of the German troops be seen in Eastern European countries that went through great devastation because of German troops? He didn't count in Polish, maybe resistance, you know, like ex-Armia Krajowa units. So I think, as I said, I think that the Allies would have been able to push until kind of the border of the Soviet Union, or a little bit more deep into it. But then, you know, like there would be some kind of a frontier and something like that. And you need to take into account Finland, which had first the Winter War, then the continuation war, where they again lost the parts of Karelia and that part. So I think that even Finland would join the Allies to retake the parts of Karelia. But okay, I hope that you enjoyed it. Once again, the link to the original video is in the description below. Go give AlternateHub all the respect that he, you know, like deserves for his videos. If you want to be part of the Patreon community, the link is in the description below. Okay, until the next time, see ya.